There's no clock in this room.
That's a fact.
Throw something at me when I go. I tell you a funny story. I had an opportunity to preach to travel to Africa to do some mission work there, to do some Sabbath teaching and stuff like that. And there was this rather large church. It was octagonal in shape. And to hold up the roof, there were pillars scattered throughout the sanctuary space. And one of the pillars, right about here, right in front of the pulpit. And the elders of the church, as a gift to their pastor, had purchased a clock. A very large clock. And it was right there.
Was it an alarm clock?
No. No. But there was no way he could miss it. So, it is a joy to be back with you today. I just got to say, there is something about this body that is alive. And I got this crazy feeling in my head that it might be the Spirit of God. Just a hunch. Just a hunch. So yeah, this is a good place to be. I'm Kelly Johnson, for those of you that don't know who I am. I'm the Director of Pastoral Care. I was here a few months back when we sent these two out the door. Now they're back. Thank you for coming back. There's the face. I have another story I will not go into, which kind of threw me a curveball a couple of weeks ago. Anyway, we're going to start with a little bit of audience participation. Okay? You should have all been given a 3x5 card when you came through the door. I want you to take that out, and I want you to answer, to finish this sentence. When Pastor returns, I would like him to... ... This is the time when I always realize I should have recorded the Jeopardy theme song. Instead of that playing in the background. So take a minute, and when you quit phone, I'm just going to give you a minute to do that. And now we're going. So good. 1 minute. Think about those things you'd like your pastor to do when he gets back, even though he's standing here, or sitting here right now. If you need an extra card, it is a good thing what you have done for your pastor. Sending him off on a sabbatical to rest and reconnect. And I cannot stress that enough. We have seen pastors who have not done this tip over. And that's when my job gets a lot harder. Oh, there we go. Time's up. Put your cards away, please. Okay. Tuck those away someplace. We're going to come back to those in a little bit. They've been on a journey. Now, how many of you remember these things called maps?
Oh, yes.
Like the big Minnesota State map, it's a huge thing. It's all folded up. It's only folded the right way from the factory. You can never get it folded up again the right way. My wife and I went on our sabbatical back in 2019. And we did a road trip to Colorado. We've never done anything like that before. It was just wild. But we had to stop once in a while and spread out the map and determine a couple of different things. Where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we headed? And that's basically our outline for today. Where have you been as a church on this sabbatical journey? Where are you now? And what's coming up? So let's go there. We're going to start with this. This is the anchor passage for me when we're talking about sabbaticals. Because this is what we hope happens to a pastor. This is where we hope he lands. This is the words of Jesus. If you ever get a chance to study the passage, make sure you back up about 3 or 4 verses up to verse 25, and you'll see that it's a prayer. And it's amazing. Because that prayer sets the tone for this. Jesus says this, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Now, realistically, if you are sitting here today as a follower of Jesus Christ, you should be living in this place on a daily basis. I've been a Christian since I was 17. I struggled to stay in this place. Because I have a tendency to take my yoke and try to cram Jesus into it instead of picking up his yoke and being joined to him. That equation only works one way, by the way. It only works when you are yoked to him. You can't pull him into your stuff. Lord, bless my work today. No. Lord, show me my work today. Should be the prayer. Another way of looking at this is from the message by Eugene Peterson. Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? I got to pause here. Your pastor wasn't burned out on religion, but there's always that possibility. And that's what sabbaticals prevent. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it, how I do life. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. That's probably my favorite line in there. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. That is the sabbatical goal. And in my brief conversation with Mike earlier today, I think he got there. The tricky part is how does he stay there? That's what we're going to talk about today. There's a wonderful book, and I recommend it for church leaders, pastors. It's called Resilient Ministry. And it's the end result of a 7-year study of pastors and how they survive in ministry. How could they be in ministry for a long time? And the authors interviewed pastors all over the country, different denominations. The only thing they had in common is they had been in ministry for a long time. And they asked them, what works? The authors crunched all the numbers and all the interviews, and they came up with 5 themes. The first one is spiritual formation. How well does the pastor care for his own soul? He's not preparing a study for Sunday or a sermon or whatever else. It's what are those rhythms that he has in his own life that feeds his own heart? What's he doing for himself? Second is self-care. This is reasonable hours of work and rest, including Sabbath, sabbatical, and just plain sleep. It's also activity, being physically active, and getting good nutrition. I'm reading a number of books lately that talk about the importance of physical activity, not just for your heart, but for your brain too. And We're seeing that more and more today. And we see it in our pastors the other way, where they don't take care of themselves and they have problems down the road. Next one is emotional and cultural intelligence. How well does he understand his own heart? How well does he understand family of origin and his personality type and all of those pieces that color his interactions with you? Is he aware of that? And what does he do when he finds something that just is a little bit off? Next one is marriage and family. What's the role of the family in ministry? What's the impact of the ministry on family? And what does he do in the tension of these two? Because they often pull a man's heart in two different directions. And lastly, is leadership and management. That's the ability to lead an organization through adaptive, constructive change. Organizations must change. If they don't change, they will die. Churches are no different. Now, if you think of, there's four, this is going to work here. Oh, yes, again. If you look at those first four, what you see is they all focus on the man, not the role. They're looking at his heart, his life, his relationships. And we found that if you can focus in a sabbatical on those four, whoops, how do I go back?
Back to the left arrow.
Left arrow. It leads back into this one. Because it comes back with renewed strength, renewed energy, and renewed focus. We'll talk about that in a bit too. Now, there's another book that, it's actually not a book, it's an incredibly long PDF file. It's 47 pages long. It's the Navigator's Handbook on Sabbaticals. I won't go into the whole thing, I'm not going to sit and read it for you, but there's a piece in there that's really good. It's the sabbatical phases, and they have 5 of them. The first one is release and relinquish. That's letting go. That's doing all this stuff leading up to the sabbatical, leaving the keys on the desk, and walking away. Many pastors tell me that the weeks leading up to a sabbatical are often the most stressful because they're trying to get everything done and then set up the church for their absence, and that's a real challenge. Next one is release, is rest and recovery, excuse me. That's when he's got a little breathing space in his life again. I've had reports from pastors who will sleep 10 or 12 hours a day for the first week after they check out, just because they are tired. And a lot of times they tell me, I didn't realize I was that tired. They just are. Phase 3 is reflect and refocus. This is where he starts to do the hard work. What's going on? This is where he starts to really reconnect with God, really reconnect with his family. This sometimes continues past the end of the sabbatical. Be aware of that. Next is realignment. This is where he may be looking at where he is and go, I've kind of drifted a little bit. And I need to get back to center. Now, I got a brother, retired law enforcement officer here. We had a little chat earlier. Those of you who don't know it, I'm a retired cop. I was also a tactical marksman. I didn't tell you that. Which means they give me the big gun and make me go far, far away to try to hit the guy if I need to. One of the things I learned is that a very small adjustment over time can be disastrous. You've got to be on the mark. That's why this is important. He needs to pause periodically and say, am I still on track with what the Lord wants me to do? That's important. Last one, phase 5 is re-entry. I like the fact that they use the word re-entry because I'm a science nerd. I like space stuff. So when I see re-entry, I'm thinking of the space capsule that's got to come back into the atmosphere. And it has to come back at just the right speed and just the right angle, or really bad things happen. If it comes in too shallow, it'll skip off, and it becomes a one-way journey because there's not enough fuel to turn it around at that point. If it comes in too shallow, too steep, it becomes a shooting star, which is disastrous for anybody who happens to be inside that capsule. Much the same for your pastor when he comes back from sabbatical. He has to come back at just the right pace, just the right speed. If not, it undoes everything he's learned. Now, at this stage in your process, you've checked off the first 4. There's one left. That's re-entry. And this is not an understatement, what I'm about to say. You as a church have the ability to make this sabbatical a success or a failure, depending on how you bring him back and bring him up to speed. The authors of Resilient Ministry put it this way. Both of us approached the end of our sabbaticals. They actually took sabbaticals in the middle of this project. Both of us approached the end of our sabbaticals with the expectation that we would not get sucked back into the hectic pace that characterized our lifestyles before the sabbatical. But within a matter of weeks, both of us had slipped back into those patterns we sought to avoid. We now know the power of systems to squeeze us into the mold of expectations. When Mike left, and when they had been functioning in a box, they were fairly comfortable in that box. But then they moved out of that box for a season. Now they're moving back in, except the box may now be a different shape. And some things might need to be adjusted. Otherwise, you're going to force them back into the same box, and you've undone the sabbatical. Can you see that? Be aware of that. You see, this is something I learned way too late in life. It's the importance of paths. Every one of us has a life path that we have been on. And if I want to know you, what's your name? Bethany. If I want to know Bethany, I have to take the time to get to know her path. My tendency is to take my life path and project it on you. And if I see something in your behavior that doesn't fit my expectations of my life path, I judge you. Whoops. Wait a minute. That's not good. I have to get to know her and get to know her life path. And then we can talk. And she has to know mine. Goes both ways. For a season, this has been your path as a church. Now, that's where you've been the last 3 months. Now, if you look, a couple things I want to point out. It's very flat, it's very level. There probably hasn't been a lot of change. But if you look close, you see that there are some boards that are different. Some things have changed, but basically it's been the same path. Flat, level, really sturdy guardrails. It's not going anywhere. You're going to be staying on that path. And if you look, you see that it has a definite end. Good, okay. Mike and Wendy's path, a little different. It's been a little up and down. It's been a little twisty and turny. The steps aren't quite as even. Those handrails I wouldn't trust for nothing. And if you look at it, the path goes up the hill, turns slightly to the left, and goes over the top. In other words, their path isn't done yet. Bear that in mind. The lessons they're learning and they learned on sabbatical aren't finished yet. They're going to be taking those things and processing and working with them for some time now. Different paths create different people. My path is different than yours. Your path is different than mine. If you and I are going to connect, we need to do something called DTR. That's defining the relationship. What's it look like? Now, your pastor has been away. Part of that dynamic is the path. The other part of the dynamic is the expectations. Now here I'm going to confess that I stole something, flat out stole it, from a guy by the name of Pete Scazzaro, a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. In that book, he talks about expectations and how to tell if an expectation is valid. First off, is the expectation conscious? Are you aware of it? Now, every one of you, when you came in the door today, had an unconscious expectation about worship today. All right? Let's do a little imagination exercise. I want you to close your eyes. Trust me. Imagine you've arrived at church. You've come in the way you normally come in. You walk through the back doors of the sanctuary, and you stop. And you realize something's changed. At the front of the sanctuary, instead of the keyboard and the drums and the guitar stands, there are 3 people standing there. One is holding an accordion. One has a set of bagpipes. And the third has a tuba. And Wendy stands up and says, "These 3 guests are going to be leading worship today." What's going on in your heart at this particular moment? What are you feeling right now? Talk to me. Something new, positive or negative. You can go either way. Okay? Somebody said something? Excitement. That's a good attitude to have. Some would use maybe a different word called anxiety. I showed this illustration in the church in Mound, and when we got to the bagpipe part, the guy in the front row went, "Yes!" Turns out she's Scottish, yes. Oh, yeah. Yep. That happens. But a lot of people would go, "Wait a minute. Somebody moved my stuff." Anytime you feel something kind of welling up inside you, chances are you bumped up against an expectation in your life. And that's really a good time to take a deep breath. And take a step back and go, okay, what just happened here? Whether that's with your kids, whether it's with your family, it's your spouse, or it's in this context. Is that expectation conscious? Are you aware of it? The next one is the expectation realistic? Can it be done at all? My wife and I consider ourselves pretty good parents. And in reflecting back on our parenting years, I remember a time when our little guy, second child, about this high, he's now about that high. Fine, upstanding man. We said, son, it's time to go clean your room. Okay. He runs upstairs. We look at each other and go, shoot, this parenting means this is a piece of cake. Not a problem. And all went well for about 10 minutes. And then from his room, we heard two sounds. One was the sound of Lego bricks being shuffled around in a large plastic bin. He had a lot of Lego bricks. And the other one was the sound of singing. Probably a VeggieTales tune. And we looked at each other and went, okay, we need to go and talk to the boy. He didn't know how to clean his room. We never taught him. Well, we had an expectation that he would just somehow miraculously figure that out. And we sat down on the floor and we taught him this is what cleaning your room means, and he got it. We had an unrealistic expectation. He did not know how to do it. The next one is communicated. Is the expectation communicated in a way that is understandable? And has it been heard and understood? Now, I'm going to say, there are teenagers here. Any teenagers? You guys are not quite, okay, wow. You need to work on that. Not personally.
That's Jeremy's job.
That's Jeremy's job, okay. Maybe you probably, I always pick on teenagers at this point, but you've probably seen it before. You're engaging with somebody, and they're doing this. And you're talking to them, and you're asking them questions, and they go, uh-huh. Have they heard you? Probably not. Because they're here. Their brain is here. Not engaging with you. Make sure that that expectation has been communicated in a way that can be understood. And lastly, is it agreed upon? Has the other party said, yes, I will agree to that. I will do that thing. Fully aware of the consequences of doing it or not doing it. Is it agreed to? Conscious, realistic, communicated, agreed to. Those are the 4 criteria of any expectation. Now, reach into your pocket and pull out your little card. Because what you wrote on here are expectations about your pastor's return. Let's test them and see if they're valid. First test. Is it conscious? Well, duh. I'm speaking for myself, Kelly. They wrote it down. If you wrote it down, you're aware of it. It's a conscious expectation. Second, is it realistic? Well, I can't answer that question because I don't know what you wrote. You know, if you wrote something like, I want him to resume an exegetical preaching series, that's a realistic expectation for a trained pastor to do, okay? If you wrote, I want him to solve the crisis in the Middle East, that's outside his scope, okay? Bear that in mind. Has it been communicated? The answer to that one is a whopping no. Now, maybe some of those things might fall into the area of his ministry description or something like that, so it has been communicated. But some of the things in your card might not be. Maybe they should be. I don't know. And it definitely hasn't been agreed to because he hasn't seen it. So what I'm going to recommend you do with that card is throw it away. And hold really loose to those expectations in your head and your heart. Because those expectations can be deadly. You both have to be aware that you're both coming back with a set of expectations. You have them, they have them. That's just a healthy way to live with anybody you deal with. What expectations do I have about this relationship in this place? My wife and I just celebrated our 42nd anniversary. We still dance with this stuff. We had one the other night. It was like, okay, what just happened here? Oh, you had an expectation that I was going to do something, I didn't do it. Let's back up and we'll come at it again. That's important. The other piece that's important is returning at the right pace. We talked about that. One wise seminary professor once remarked, it is not possible to board a moving train with a perpendicular loop. Very true. Therefore, the pastor needs to run alongside for a while to catch up with the church's momentum. That's why on freeways you have on-ramps and not just intersections. You've got to get up to speed. They've been gone for a while. And you mentioned maybe you were a little bit discombobulated. You're still getting up to speed. Give yourself grace. You guys give them some grace for that too. That's important. What I mean by returning slowly is a number of things. Number one, start light. First week or two, he's just getting up to speed. The phrase no truck dumping, that's walking into his office with a basket full of stuff for him to do, flipping it upside down on his desk and going, welcome back, and walking away. Not helping. I know one church I worked with that the pastor came back on a Tuesday night was the quarterly business meeting. And I talked to one of the elders, said, can you postpone that? Oh no, it's going to be good. We're going to have cake and cookies. No, you're not seeing my point. You're pushing them into the deep end of the pool, and you might not be ready for it yet. I recommend no preaching for 2 weeks. I don't know what your schedule is like. That's totally up to you.
No way.
Somebody else has got to come very good. Okay,
No,
great.
I'm up there on next Sunday.
Okay.
I'm just too pumped up.
That's a good thing. Okay? Some guys come back and they go, whoa, I'm still reeling. I'm still trying to get caught up. Some guys, I tell churches when I'm talking to the leaders about the sabbatical, that if it's a 12-week sabbatical, that the pastor's going to lose a week on either end. He loses a week on the front end because he's just unplugging yet. His brain keeps going back to the desk. Did I do all this stuff? On the other end, in your case, you felt good. His brain starts jumping back. And it's hard for him to stay disconnected because he wants to be back with his people. That's a really good thing. He might want to establish some new routines in your schedules. Might be some adjustments around self-care and stuff like that. One book I read said to expect, quote, a volatile range of emotions. He might be processing things internally. And sometimes those things leak out. Be aware of that. I tell people that imagine he's wearing a shirt that says fragile. Human beings handle with care. It's not a bad way for us to think about anybody, really, especially in this day and age. Remember that the deepest sabbatical lessons may not be immediately evident. There might be something chewing in him that he's just going to have to grind it out. Remember to reinforce how valuable this time away has been. Not just for them, but for you as a church. You guys rose to the occasion. You know, I did not get a single call from your leadership team saying, what do we do in this situation? You guys dealt with it. Whatever popped up. And that was good. Words from returning pastors. Don't expect the big change. The sabbatical may have just been for rest, or it was the start of the process. You may have changed. Maybe you just returned to true north. You did that compass reset again. That's important. Some things to think about. Normal has been reshaped, possibly been reformed in some way. There might be some new boundaries. Remember, boundaries are those emotional fences that we put around the things we value. People, time, the Word of God, those kind of things. Expectations we've already talked about. There might be some new routines. Maybe he's going to try to build that unforced rhythm of grace into his life a little bit more. And there might be a vision for direction change in some way. I don't know. That's up to him and the Lord. Do not ask, what did you accomplish on your sabbatical?
Amen.
If Mike is a typical guy, I'm a guy, you're a guy, we think the same, it's a guy thing. If you ask what he accomplished, his brain will shift into checklist mode. And if he hasn't checked all the boxes, all of a sudden he feels like a failure. Oops. I worked with a pastor once who started his sabbatical with a color-coded spreadsheet of the books he was going to read. This book, so many days. This book, so many days. This book, so many days. Little OCD there. I said, that's really great, but hold loose to it. Because if you get to the end of the sabbatical and you haven't read all those books, how are you going to feel? And you stop. That's the problem. That's how you're going to feel. I speak from experience. I was senior counselor for a while, and I had a stack of books on my desk. And I told her one day, I said, I'm just frustrated. I got this stack of books and I can't get through them. Who's making you read the books? She asked. She's this little kind of one. Sits in this big wingback chair. With a laptop like this. And then she nails me right between us. Who's making you read those books? Well, nobody. They're good books. I don't want to read them. And you're not reading them, yeah, and now you're frustrated, yeah. So let me speak back to you, she said. You put an expectation on yourself that you're going to read these books, and because you haven't read those books, now you're going to beat yourself up. Am I understanding the problem right? And I went, uh-huh. And I felt this high at that particular moment. Yeah, we put expectations on ourselves. Gotta be careful with that. So don't do that to them. Do say, welcome back. We missed you. We're glad you had that time to be with Jesus. If he wants to share, same day, they're in different situations because you both went, it was fantastic. If they want to share stuff, leave it up to them. Leave it up to them. Here's some gifts for your returning pastor. Number one, giving time. Time to reflect, time to process, time to sort through stuff. Give him grace. Let him be real about what he's feeling. Let him be real about adjustments that he needs to make. Relationships, let him drive the calendar. Go ahead and ask him to lunch or coffee or dinner. That's fine. But if they say no for a while, be okay with that. Ask him again in a month. Come back to it later. Now we're going to get personal. This is for you. First question. How can I let Pastor direct the pace and rhythm of his return? Be thinking about that. That ties to the second one. What expectations do I have? And are those expectations going to be a barrier for his doing what he needs to do? To plug that in. Lastly, and I think most importantly, this is the last one. How can I step into the rest promised in Matthew 11? If you're not there in your life, talk to somebody. Talk to somebody about how to get there. I want to thank you again for giving your pastor this opportunity. And I'm going to be honest with you here. I say this for purely selfish reasons. I love what I do. It is an absolute hoot to walk with pastors. Sometimes it's hard. And it does my heart good to see a church like you that's caring for your pastor. Because I know my job's going to be a little easier because of it. So I thank you. I thank you for taking the effort to do what you needed to do during this time. Let me close in prayer. The worship team come back up, is that right? Okay. Do well, if you please. Heavenly Father, thank you for this church, for your church, and how they have blessed their pastor. I just ask, Lord, that you would continue to pour blessings on the church, on Mike and Wendy, as they re-engage and find some new rhythms and find new peace. Thank you. In Jesus' name.